do you take the bird in hand over two in the bush? If maybe the bird in hand, depending on how you like that guy.
Pay heed, all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. Back at you again with a new episode. I'm Nick Springer alongside Kevin Flaherty. Of course, we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. We have a little bit of a combo episode coming at you today. We're going to be talking some of the latest transfer portal updates for KU basketball. There's been some more movement there as Kansas is starting to, I think, zero in on the players that they're really interested in filling those last couple spots as we talked about. If you happen to miss any of our previous discussions about who's already committed with Trey White and Jaden Dawson, you can check out our previous episodes talking about that as well. And we're also going to have some KU football discussion at the end of the show as Lance Leipold had his final press conference of the spring as KU football wrapped up spring football in totality on Friday. So we'll get to that and sort of our closing thoughts on spring football. Of course, we still have a couple more position breakdowns that we have not gotten to you guys. So if you've been enjoying those over the course of the spring, thank you so much for tuning in for those as well. And if you missed any of those, you can go back and check them out on our feed. We're talking defensive tackles, safeties, tight ends, offensive line, every position.
Wide receivers. We talked wide receivers. Yeah.
We were actually just doing the math before the show, a little peek behind the curtains here. We have 4 position groups left that we're going to be breaking down over the course of the remainder of spring. Quarterback and running back on offense, and defensive ends and
safeties.
Yeah, I guess safeties. We haven't done safeties yet. Those are the 4 we haven't done. And then special teams will get in there as well. We actually had a great interview with Finn Lappin, the punter. As he's coming in to become the new Australian punter after the departure of Damon Grieve. So don't worry, those are coming too. So we're going to talk a little bit about spring football and sort of wrapping it up at the end of the show. But as always, if you have not already, please subscribe, like the channel, drop a comment on YouTube. You can share your thoughts over there. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple and Spotify. Just make sure you subscribe wherever you are listening and or watching, and make sure you have those notification bells turned on for when you know our latest shows come out, like this show here today. All right, so we're recording this on Monday afternoon, and Kansas has been more active. I mentioned it at the end of last week that the dead period where no visits can happen was going to end at the end of last week. It did, and Kansas has already taken advantage of the opportunity to try to get some more guys on campus. Let's start with a new name who we actually haven't talked about yet on this show, and that's Princeton guard, former Princeton guard, obviously in the transfer portal, Xavier Lee. He is in the transfer portal from Princeton. He averaged almost 17 points per game last season, 30 games for Princeton. And this is a guy, Kevin, that is your prototypical outside three-point shooter. That's really his specialties. He is not much of a guy that's going to be very successful at the rim, but he can shoot the ball pretty well. Very, very high volume for Princeton last season, over 5 threes per game, and shot at just under 37%. So an above average three-point shooter, to say the least. And so I think this one becomes an interesting discussion because we'll get into the other guy that we're going to mention later on in the show, where it feels like Kansas is in a position at a bit of a crossroads of what type of players now they want to position around who they already have. And this kind of goes into the discussions that we've had about making that a priority, of making sure you are getting guys that fit together. We're looking at Xavier Lee specifically, Kevin, before we get into Melvin Council later. Where do you think he could possibly fit in should he choose to come to Kansas? He's already been on a visit to Kansas, it was reported over the weekend, so the interest is obviously there. He's got interest from other high major schools. Florida is another school that's interested in him. Looking at him with Kansas specifically, where would you see him fitting in with the pieces that KU already has on this team right now?
Yeah, I like Lee as a potential fit next to Darren Peterson. You know, I think the shooting, the ability to shoot off the dribble, you know, kind of at that 2 spot next to a scoring point guard. I'm not saying he reminds you of this person, but you know, it's a little bit of that whole like Devontae Graham with Frank Mason type of thing, where Frank Mason is probably going to carry your scoring, but also like having that guard next to him that can pull up off the dribble, even on the break, and make shots. I think one of the things too, Nick, you mentioned he's not a great shooter at the rim. He doesn't get to the free throw line a whole lot. One thing he does do very well off the bounce, though, is he drives to create. He's a really good passer off of the bounce. He's got a lot of quickness, and he has good handle. When you watch him, he does a really good job of making his speed play up because he can adjust and change tempos. And so he can be one of those guys that kind of gives you a little bit of a lazy dribble and then bam, a hard first step and he's in the lane. I really like a guy like that next to Peterson, somebody who can be a shoot from the outside type guy, but also can be somebody that when Kansas is running its little dribble weave that we all know the Jayhawks like doing, coming off of ball screens, dribble handoffs. He's somebody that if the defense follows Peterson after one of those handoffs and Lee gets it going the other way, he's somebody that can really take advantage. And when you look at some of the shooters that Kansas has looked at in the portal, Nick, I think that Lee is somebody that, along with Peterson and the way that Peterson's playmaking has really progressed, you would have two guys who would be very good at finding their teammates off of the drive. I think somebody who would benefit a lot. I talked about how he would help Darren Peterson out. I think he would help Flory Badunga out quite a bit too with Flory's ability to kind of get to that dunker spot and Lee's unselfishness. I think that he's somebody who fits really well from that perspective too.
Yeah, shooting it's such a hot button issue, right? It's a buzzword, shooting, shooters, having more shooters, right? And we've talked about it with the fact that you've added Trey White, a guy who is probably going to be looking at being your starting four, who has the ability to step out a little bit. And so while overall you may look at the roster and say, well, is there anybody that's a really great shooter? Maybe not, but I think Kansas should be okay even regardless of that. And
Dawson probably qualifies just because the degree of difficulty of the shots that Dawson, the reason he didn't shoot 40% isn't because he's not capable of shooting 40%. It's because at Loyola Chicago, he was asked, hey man, if you're open at 26, you got to pull that thing. And so I do think Dawson is adaptable because I know some people are maybe a little bit worried, like, oh my gosh, is he going to be that guy and get benched at KU? I don't think so. I think he's somebody that you could see his efficiency actually go up because he's not going to be asked to be that guy as often as he was at Loyola. But Dawson's kind of the one guy that I would circle and say, okay, this guy I would qualify as a really good, if not great shooter. I just think the percentage ticks down a little bit because when you're taking step backs from 25 feet, that's going to take the percentage down a little bit.
Well, and Lee honestly is somewhat similar in that similar vein, right? I mean, just under 30,
a lot of shots all in hand, yeah, for sure.
Exactly, just under 37% from three. But I mean, Kevin, he finished the year making at least 3 threes in 7 consecutive games in the season.
Yep.
So he was a volume shooter and a guy that did have the ball in his hands a lot. And you can look at that one of two ways. I think you kind of touched on how he would work with Darren Peterson. When you look at a player like this who is shooting off the dribble a lot, and you think about the fact that, well, with KU, you expect Darren Peterson to have the ball a lot. So would that sort of diminish Lee's effectiveness if he's not able to shoot off the dribble or kind of how he's been doing it at Princeton? I don't know. It's hard to tell, right? I mean, it's hard to tell with that type of stuff. But he does seem like a guy that could fit in. He's at 6'4", so good size. And as we talked about, Kansas unequivocally is in the search for at least one more guard because right now you have a stable of 3 guys with Darren Peterson, Jaden Dawson, and Omarco Jackson. You certainly want to add a 4th, and you could even make the argument for adding another beyond that as well. But Lee becomes a new name to watch out of Princeton. One thing, again, that I always just like to look at, this is just a me thing when we talk about players like this, players that maybe didn't play at the Power 5 level, is how do they perform against that level of competition? Well, for Princeton, they didn't really play. They played, let's see, I believe their only Power 5 opponent the whole season was Rutgers. They actually beat Rutgers, and Xavier Lee had 21 points in that game, was 1 of 5 from the floor. He was 7 of 22 in total from the floor, 1 of 5 from 3, 6 of 17 from 2. That was the only Power 5 opponent I believe they played. They also played Texas State. Lee had 30 points in that game. Against Texas State, played Loyola Chicago. He scored 17. He finished the year scoring at least 14 points in his last 6 games, including 25 against Harvard, 24 against Dartmouth. They did lose to Yale in the conference tournament in a close game. Of course, Yale went on to make the NCAA tournament. as well. And Princeton has just been in the NCAA tournament and made that run a couple years ago as a 15 seed. So, but yeah, I think this would be a really potentially quality ad for Kate.
Yeah,
certainly. Now I mentioned it. This is at a bit of a crossroads for Kansas because they are also very much firmly in the hunt for another guard who plays a different style, somebody we've already talked about in Melvin Council. But I want to kind of add to our thoughts a little bit on that compared to Lee as well. And then also the search for a big man continues. We'll talk a little bit about that as well coming up. Let's take a break right now, though. So that gives us a chance to tell you about Home Field Apparel. You can shop Home Field Apparel at homefieldapparel.com. and use that promo code PAY24. Kevin, did you happen to notice Home Field Apparel? They are actually adding baseball exclusive schools. So you can keep an eye out for that. They've announced it last week. There's going to be, I think, 20 schools. I don't know if Kansas is going to be one of those, but there are 20 schools are going to have some Home Field exclusive baseball apparel. So keep an eye out for that. Kansas, I would think, should be probably. Listen, I would argue that Kansas should be one of those. That's all I'll say. But keep an eye out for that. And, of course, you can shop any of their other items as well, 40-plus Kansas items, 130 other schools. Use that code PAY24 for 15% off of your first order at homefieldapparel.com. More KU basketball talk is coming up next.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.
Are you ready to win some real cash during the basketball playoffs? Well, check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 posterizes the competition. And yeah, that includes prize picks. Hit all your picks and score higher minimum payouts on Pick 6, plus even more cash if you outscore the competition. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. New players get 50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Here's what you got to do. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to play $5. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the PAY podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC. If you have not already, please subscribe. Apple, Spotify, on our YouTube channel as well. We really, really appreciate the support there. Drop a comment, share your thoughts. Reach out to us on social media at KCSN on Twitter, at KFlahertyKCSN, at NickSpringer29. Find us anywhere and show some love to the show as well. We really appreciate that, and we appreciate the support and love getting feedback as well from those of you that tune in. So this is a guy we've already talked about a little bit, Kevin, previously on a show last week, and that's Melvin Council, another guard at 6'4" out of St. Bonaventure, who is in the transfer portal, another player that Kansas is very interested in. In fact, it's reported that as of this recording on Monday, he is getting to campus for his visits here in Lawrence. So Kansas obviously very active and looking for a guard. Council, again, is a guy we kind of already touched on a little bit, but he's somebody that brings a very different skill set, I think,
yes,
as compared to Xavier Lee. And this is where I keep kind of getting to that point of, I guess I can get your thoughts on this too, Kevin, but I am not under the impression that Kansas is going to be able to get both Lee and Council. They're two guys that are going to be playing a similar position, and they have both of them have other high major schools that are interested in them. So I am not under that impression. So Kansas is going to have to make a decision here. Do they want somebody who is more of a perimeter scorer in Lee, or maybe more of the bigger bodied athletic player in Council? What's your read on that? And if it were if you were Bill Self, would you have a pick as where you would go on the situation?
Yeah, it's that whole recruiting thing with committable offers, right? In terms of, do you take the bird in hand over two in the bush? If maybe the bird in hand, depending on how you like that guy. I think that's the interesting thing is we don't know what Kansas's board looks like. It may be that they have Council above Lee. It may be that they have Lee above Council. Like you said, it's kind of tough to compare them a little bit because you're looking at very different things. Council, I will say, Nick, is a Bill Self player, right? He's a guy that defends, has toughness, is a really good athlete. Was a guy that, as we talked about when we talked about him before, was impossible for St. Bonaventure to take off the court. He was indispensable. And when you look at the guys that Bill Self loves to coach and really kind of falls in love with, Council is one of those guys. Now, to me, my sort of less educated look at it, if you will, I really like Lee, and I think Lee is a guy that I personally, if you could take both, and I don't think Kansas is going to be able to, I think you do, because I think you could find a fit for both guys. Obviously, that would wind up being really pricey. I think the issue is I don't know where exactly Kansas sits with Lee, and that's the calculation that KU needs to make, because if you're at a spot right now where you're like, hey, this is our guy, we want to get Lee, he is 1A, but you think you're going to lose him to Florida, then you take Council. And at the same time, if you feel like Lee is your 1A guy, that's the dude, but you feel like you have a great chance to get him, maybe you don't pull the trigger on that, and you risk offending Council. Of course, the risk there, as you mentioned, is you don't want to lose both, because they're both really, really good players. And so I think if Council commits, it would be very hard for me to say no, because I do think that he would be a benefit to KU. He's a really good player. He fits all of those different things. I do think, though, that if you're Kansas, Darren Peterson is your number one player for next year. I still think they need a number two. And offensively, I would say. Defensively, I think Flory is going to be one of their best two-way players. But I think you want to bring in another guy who's a scoring threat. And so from that perspective, I think Lee can be that guy. I'm not as confident in saying that Council can be that guy, but that also is determined by how you feel with other guys. Maybe if you miss on Lee but take Council, you can take a guy like RJ Luis or somebody like that. And so there's all of that is a really long way, Nick, to say there's a lot of calculations here. How do you think you would play it out in this situation? I mean, you know me, I would probably, Lee would be my choice, but if Council committed, I'd have a really hard time saying no.
See, I actually think Council would be my choice in this situation for one reason. And it's actually something that you said at the very beginning of that whole conversation. Council is a Bill Self player.
He is.
My biggest takeaway, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, I think, on the show about this era of the transfer portal and maybe where Kansas has missed a little bit more in some cases than other schools, is Bill Self has a specific way that he wants to play / coach. And when you bring in guys that are not familiar with that or are not that type of player, you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. That's how you end up with AJ Storr. That's how you end up with those types of misses in the transfer portal. And Council, as you said, he screamed Bill Self player to me.
Yes.
So even if Xavier Lee is maybe the better player, quote unquote, or the better threat to score, what we've seen and what's been demonstrated, I think, over the past couple of years with Bill Self is that doesn't matter. You have to be able to earn Bill Self's trust. You can be the greatest player of all time at whatever school wherever hell school you were at before. That doesn't matter when you come to Kansas because of how Bill Self is, right? And that's just how he is. I mean, you have to earn his trust. You have to do the little things. You have to do all those things, right, in order to get to everything else. And that is why I would personally say, give me Melvin Council, because he, to me, looks like the guy that is going to do all those things and is going to be able to earn Bill Self's trust and is going to be able to then play to his ability at Kansas. And I'm not saying that David Lee can't do those things or couldn't do those things if he comes to KU. But I look at Melvin Council and I see somebody that's better fit to be at Kansas. And I mean, that's been the whole theme of this whole offseason, I feel like, is fit over, go get the best players, right? Because we've seen KU try that. We've seen KU say, hey, this guy scored 18 a game at Wisconsin. Hey, this guy scored whatever. This guy was a great elite 3-and-D shooter at Alabama, went to Final Four. We'll make it work. We'll just get all those guys and we'll just make it work. Well, guess what? It hasn't worked. Now I look at Melvin Council and say, oh, he averaged 14 points per game at St. Bonaventure. Not a insane number, right? Not a crazy number. But like you said, he impacts the game in so many ways that St. Bonaventure couldn't even take him off the floor. And that screams Bill Self player to me. So that is why if I were in the situation to advise Bill Self, which obviously I'm not, Bill Self doesn't care what I think. But if I was, I would say, hey man, go get this guy because he's the type of player that I think is going to be able to assimilate into your system a lot quicker. And then at that point, once you have his trust and he has your trust, you go from there, right?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
I think there's a disconnect too with some fans in that they're just kind of like, I don't want a team that can't shoot, again. I don't want there to be lineups or there's not enough shooting on the court. Houston almost won a national title, and I'm not saying the Cougars couldn't shoot, but they had two non-shooters on the court at the same time. The other three guys could shoot, but the two of the guys were non-shooters. And what's the one thing that Houston pursues in the portal, Nick? It's fit. It's guys who are going to plug into Houston's culture that Kelvin Sampson is going to trust. And so it's funny because you hear fans ask, like, well, what's Houston doing better than we're doing? What's this? What's that? I think Council would be a very Houston type fit, in terms of taking a defensive guy who's got the right mentality, who's got the right fit, who's going to fit the culture. And again, to your point, it's not saying that Lee can't, but it is saying that Council screams, that he's going to be able to do those things. And so even if Lee is an upgrade as a player, if Council is checking all of those boxes, it does make a lot of sense. And you made the point well, too, that a lot of Kansas's misses have been taking guys that, Nick Timberlake made so much sense in at the time because it's like, hey, KU needs shooting. This is a guy that shot the cover off at Towson. This is absolutely no doubt going to work. He's coming in for this specific role, and the guys that wind up finding success, when KU got him, you and I talked, I feel like, about Shaq Moore in a similar way to Council, where it was, this guy is going to be a guy that may play more than you think he's going to because he's the type of guy that Self is going to like with toughness and defense. And sure enough, when Shaq Moore was healthy this year, KU had a really hard time taking Shaq Moore off the court. And quite frankly, that stretch when Shaq was starting was probably the best stretch this year's KU team had.
The bottom line is this. I think it's pretty clear that KU has narrowed it down to one of these two guys to be their other guard in the rotation. And we'll see how things unfold. Lee, I believe, is going to be having a visit to Florida at some point. St. John's is another school that's very interested in him.
Yep.
Council, as I said, is on campus as of Monday night, I think, from St. Bonaventure. He's got some other names around him too. So one of these two guys, I think you can expect to make their decisions, and hopefully one of them ends up selecting Kansas. And if that does happen, we will have you covered with breaking their games down even deeper as well when they join if they join the roster. So the other big hole that we've discussed, and we talked about it last week in our last episode talking about the transfer portal, is the big man position.
Yep.
You have Flory Badunga. You retained Flory Badunga, which, as you said, Kevin, then, and I'm sure you feel the same way now, was maybe the biggest biggest, I guess, get out of the transfer portal for KU because of what his upside is and the fact that you just probably weren't going to be able to find a player that could match what his ceiling can be. So you get Floyd Badunga back. You have Bryson Tiller coming off of an injury. You'd like to get somebody else to be in that rotation at the 5 position. And there is a new name that has surfaced. And we have actually seen a lot of schools start to go this route, Kevin. And that is looking to Europe. And in Europe, you get a chance to see guys at a younger age playing against professional level basketball. You know, they start playing at a much younger age at the professional level. And in this particular situation, Kansas seems to be in the hunt for a big man in Europe, formerly out of South Africa, Paul Mbaya, I believe. At 6'11", he just turned 20. His birthday was literally last week, actually. At 6'11", and he plays in. I'm not going to claim to be an expert of European basketball, but I believe this is the highest French league.
Yes. Yeah, he plays for Avcel in the French Pro League. Yeah,
which that's the highest level of French league, I believe.
I think isn't he teammates with Tarek Black?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I think he might be.
Okay. Well, there you go. How about that? Well, yeah. Well, listen, you see that sometimes. I mean, there's guys that are like 30 playing in those leagues, and you get 17, 18, 19-year-olds playing in those leagues. And, you know, we've seen different programs. Again, it's become a lot more common, I think, to bring international players. Obviously, Kansas brought in Johnny Furphy from Australia.
Black does play for Avcel, so yeah, they're teammates. It's actually kind of funny you say that. There's a big man that K-State is looking at and is projected to get. I think he's a power forward who plays pro, and I pulled up a clip of his, and it was
David McCormick.
A clip of him throwing an alley-oop to David McCormick. Yeah, exactly.
I saw that too. Yeah, I saw that too. So how about that? Old friends alert ×2 with national champion David McCormick and Tarek Black as well. So yeah, Paul Mbaya is the name that we're keeping an eye on here in the Euro leagues for potentially that extra big man position. Like I said, he's at 6'11", originally from South Africa, and is playing currently in France. I don't really know that much more about him other than
shot blocking energy guy. Basically, would be and he's shown some low post flashes, according to Eric Bossy over there at 24/7. And I think when you look at what you would want for sort of that 5 behind Flory, that sounds pretty good to me. You know, getting a 6'11" athletic guy who's going to block shots and play with a lot of energy. Yeah, that sounds about perfect. You know, sign me up for a guy like that you can then develop a little bit, you know, in that spot. That would be a really nice fit for next year's roster, I think.
Well, and we always knew that this was going to be a bit more of a tricky proposition for Kansas, where you find the proper piece, because you have Floyd Badunga, and we expect that Floyd Badunga is going to play 30 minutes per game, probably, with his abilities. So knowing that, it means you're looking to make a pretty tough sell to somebody that wants to join this roster, right? Of, hey, you're going to get 10 to 15 minutes a game probably behind Flory. And so we talked about it. That's probably going to be either an experienced big man, maybe that is just wants to play at the Power 5 level and is not really concerned about that, wants to play at Kansas. Or in this particular case, you have a chance to bring in an international player who is a guy that, as you said, maybe has a chance to bring a lot of energy and can do those things off the bench as well for Kansas. So that's a name to keep an eye on, Paul Mbaya. By the way, Zach Clements, did you see where Mr. Clements committed to?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. He is going to be an Aggie down in. I
feel sorry for him. I always liked Zach as a person, and he didn't deserve that.
Yeah, I mean, you're a Texas guy. You don't know. You covered Texas, so you probably understand that rivalry a little bit better than most. But yeah, he's going to be an Aggie. So.
I do think, you know, he's from Texas originally, and I do think that I do think when you look at that system that they run and everything, Zach's going to have a chance to to actually get some run and get some shots off from the outside too. It could wind up being a really good fit for him from a basketball perspective and kind of play to his strengths a little bit.
Well, and they obviously brought in who'd they hire? Bucky. They're doing Bucky ball now.
Yeah.
So Bucky ball loves to shoot. Kansas knows that from playing against him. Zach Clements can be in a
charge or hand up in the. That's going to be Zach Clements next NCAA tournament. So
hopefully
watch out.
You know what? I would love that as long as it's not against Kansas.
Yeah, for sure.
It would make me angry if it was against Kansas, but
yeah,
I would love that overall. Bollenbein is the next name to keep an eye on at the big man position. That's about it right now for the transfer portal for Kansas. Things again heating up with a couple of players. I think those two guards definitely names to watch. Bollenbein is one that I think my interest is peaked a little bit. We'll see what happens with Kansas. Again, I think that's a situation where as time progresses, you're looking for a very specific fit, so it's going to be probably more difficult to find that over time. By the way, one other note: the transfer portal, the date to enter, so you have to enter by, comes up at the end of this week. So you're going to be seeing probably more names enter, and then after that happens, then you kind of have to wait until some of the NBA guys, like your RJ Lewis's, for example, that entered the portal but also entered the NBA draft, and they have until I think the end of May to actually really make a decision. So that's kind of the current timetable that we're looking at. But yeah, for any new players that may enter, they have until I think the 20th, I believe, is the final day to enter. So what is that? The end of this week? Next time, Sunday. Yeah.
And then to your point, once you're in, you can decide whenever. It's just you have to be in by a certain date.
Yep. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll continue to provide any updates on that. And again, keep an eye out maybe for some commitments as well, potentially, I think, for Kansas later this week. All right, we'll take one more quick break, and when we come back, we're going to pivot to a little bit of football. Lance Leipold spoke with the media on Friday to wrap up spring football. We want to get to that audio. He spoke at length a little bit, so we'll get a chance to hear from Lance Leipold himself. We'll share a little bit of some of our final thoughts on spring football as well. That's coming up on the other side.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
This is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. If you haven't already and you've made it this far into the show, I don't know what else to tell you. Subscribe, please. Apple, Spotify, on audio, or on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. We very much appreciate it. We appreciate those that have already done so. You can like the channel. You can drop a comment. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review to share your thoughts, and we'll talk about them here on the show as always. So let's switch gears here a little bit to wrap up the show here, Kevin, with Lance Leipold and KU football wrapping up its spring. Lance Leipold spoke with the media quite a bit. Let's get to that first, and then we'll kind of share some of our thoughts on how things wrapped up. So firstly, here's everything that Lance Leipold had to say on Friday at the end of KU's spring football.
We've been around you long enough to know consistency is a big thing for what you want in your program and how you guys do things day to day and year to year and all that. I wonder, was there anything different or unique about this spring that stood out? Maybe not that you did differently, but just something that made this year different than past years.
I don't know. I think there were parts of there were some things that were definitely better. I think there were some things with some of our energy and physicality and some things that we were doing at a better level. I'll say this, without a doubt, I thought transition, orientation, whatever you want to say with the newcomers would have been a lot more difficult, bumpier, and more things than we had. So for that, I'm extremely appreciative of our guys, the newer guys that have come in, our returning guys that have helped acclimate them to how we do things. We do a lot of checks and balances in this program, and our punctuality and things like that of being what we're supposed to be doing the things that we ask our guys to do was significantly better than where we were a year and 2 years ago, which with even the veteran team that we had, it really shows that this group understands. It's probably a credit to some of the programs that they were in and what they've been used to and things like that. But that part I'm extremely pleased with. we've made a lot of improvement. But also we have a long way to go yet, and a lot of things we got to clean up. But that was probably the biggest thing. I think another small thing that's probably standing out to me is now that, at least in this program, by rule, we can have our analysts and other people coaching guys. The amount of players that come in and ask for extra help, you can see guys wanting to be coached, trying to ask more questions, doing things, and I think we're becoming a more knowledgeable football team as we go along, and I look for that to grow through the summer and as we head into camp.
You mentioned those newcomers, and we talked to a lot of them over the last few weeks. So many of them seem so comfortable already. I wonder if that's just a sign of culture being firmly and fully established.
Yeah, sometimes, I would, I'm looking forward to sitting down with these guys next week and get a little deeper into some of that in my end of the year meetings with them, because of some of that, I guess, smoothness of transition. I'd like to find out, maybe, hear from guys and why do they think it's gone that way. Again, between our assistant coaches, our strength staff, support staff, I think we make it pretty clear what the expectation is, and that it's consistent across the board, and our guys see that. And every time there's one or two little bumps, it's easy to get somebody on track. And like I said, we've been able to do that. And I do think again, for some guys that I guess do relocate in this new way of doing things, it's usually for opportunity, and we always talk about making the most of their opportunity, and they need that. Sometimes as we tell our guys every day, time's slipping through here, and that every day you're one day closer to completing your career, to sort of maximize the opportunities and I think some of these guys have really taken that to heart and making sure they're doing that.
Coach, just kind of going off what you were just talking about with new guys coming in, Chris Kleiman talked last week a lot about the transfer portal and just kind of the struggles with, you don't know if the guys you have now are the guys you're going to have in the fall, and maybe you're going to have new guys. And he went on for quite a bit about it. I was just kind of curious how you've kind of adjusted to this new era.
Yeah, as I've said on some of these, Chris and I have talked, and other coaches, it's unsettling in this new way of doing it. The portal opens back up, and like I said, you have a group of guys, and you think things are trending in the right direction, and you kind of got an idea where your team's heading, and then all of a sudden you get that text or phone call that can really change it. As we look at the settlement coming, hopefully they get things done here sooner than later. I think there's a lot of things going on with commissioners, and so talking to government. We're just looking for some more regulation, and you keep hearing guardrails and all that. We need to get some more consistency, and you see it in other sports than ours as well. I just don't think, where we think in society it's healthy for a young man to go to 8 different schools in 8 years. I'm trying to figure that out. Where we think that's healthy for life. And I know then the quickest thing that happens is somebody talks about coaches that move on and things like that, but there are stipulations for all of us, and whatever that sweet spot is to get it, hopefully we can get there and have consistent rosters that you can continue to make this as competitive as possible.
And then you have guys like Jalen Daniels, who is returning. He's been with the team for several seasons now. It looked like he practiced more today than past days. Just kind of what's his progress, and how good is it to have him coming back?
Yeah, he's gradually coming back. Everything points that he'll be 100% involved in everything that we do by start of summer workouts and everything. And he threw Skelly yesterday and did well. He got in more things. He's been Jalen, if you've met, if you haven't met him, but his personality, his positiveness, unfortunately he's had missed time, but through that he has learned how to stay engaged, how to be part of, I think Jim Zabrowski's done a great job. We do some 2-minute drills in situations. He's let Jalen call the 2-minute drill, so he's thinking down and distance, doing some things where we keep challenging him, and he'll be ready to go. So,
with it being this era, talking to recruits, talking to guys who are on the team, they talk about the way that you communicate with them and being upfront and honest. How important is that sort of in today's college football?
I think it's extremely important. I believe it's the way I've been raised. I think it's the way I've tried to do it. It's disappointing when you hear, and I say this probably too often without getting too much on a soapbox here today. We create a lot of our own problems in this sport, and sometimes, when something gets implemented, there's always pockets that are always figuring out how they're going to get around it, how we're going to beat it, and what we're going to do. And, like we always say, the best things I hear in recruiting is the consistency, the transparency, and the integrity in which we go about it. And we want to continue to do that. That's the way, again, it's not perfect here, but as you say, and I think that helps when you explain to young men that you're going to be dealt with in such a way that you're not always going to hear everything that you want to hear, but you're going to hear things that you need to hear. That goes with personal growth and things that, again, helps you to find it, that you're not on school number 8 by your senior year in college. So that we sit down, and when you sit down with families at the end of a recruiting visit and they talk about that, and I still think there's a good portion of people that really want to see their son grow and develop, not just into outstanding football players and finding a way to capitalize monetarily. They want them to have a plan after football and grow and become the man, the son, the sibling, and future husband and father that they want their children to be. And it's still, hopefully, between that and the educational part of things, we haven't lost sight of completely what we started off when we got in this business.
A lot of newcomers heading into the spring. Was there a position group that maybe heading into the spring you were looking at saying, hey, I'm not entirely sure what we have here, that you feel a lot better about coming out of the spring?
Yeah, there's probably multiple ones. Probably the one that hit me pretty quickly is the receiver position, because when we lost really the top 5 guys that played the most, and to see what we have, I really like what those newcomers and Doug and Keaton and can give us. Even our 2 or 3 early enrollees that came in showed flashes, and all our early enrollees is the other thing is. To me, I'll tell them this next week, is the evaluation on the early enrollees isn't really till like the second week of camp for me, because that's where they become a little bit more, familiar with things. You can see the progress that they have over other people, of the other newcomers coming in. But I'd probably say the receiver group is probably the one that would. I also probably like say, the linebackers, that we also was a position that we had a lot of depth. I like the way those guys have come in, and they've been everything we wanted them to be.
Lance, a lot of new guys in, a lot of experienced guys out. Did you like the leadership you saw from some of the players?
Yeah, we're getting there, John. We're probably not as comfortable and complete as we want to be, and we need, and that'll be. Matt and I have talked about that, about some of the off-season things that we need to do to, now that some of the guys have kind of been on the field with us, been around this group, some of those guys that have come in need to, now that they know the routines and they're older players at their position, they've got to be a little bit more comfortable stepping up. But I still think we have solid leadership. Bryce Foster is also competing in track. So you look at somebody like him, it's kind of in and out in the leadership area up front. Kobe Baines is a guy that's really, really come a long way in trying to be more of a leader. Really has kind of turned the corner as far as putting the extra time in, doing things like that. We got some other position groups that have worked nicely in that area.
You've got a spring now with DK and Jim. What did you see from them as coordinators?
I'm really pleased with both sides of the ball and how the staff's working together, how they've kind of taken charge and doing things. DK's put a standard on the guys and what's expected each and every day as far as effort and strain and putting some things together for our defense. I like what we're doing. Excited to see where it's at. And again, staff continuity and alignment is extremely important to me. And when I'm in each room and to kind of hear the dialogue, I know it's productive and excited about what those guys will do.
Who were some of the guys who kind of surprised you that kind of emerged into a leadership role?
I guess I go back to a Kobe Baines. I think in his own way, a Daniel Highshaw has taken a big step in what he's been trying to do. The three defensive tackles that have played the most, Tommy, DJ, and Blake, have started to take steps like that. Probably one I skipped over that is Justice Finkley's a guy that's very mature, he's very businesslike out there. He's got a great work ethic. All those things, he's emerging as a guy that's respected, just how he goes about it each and every day. Taylor Davis has taken big steps in what we want from him, and DJ Graham will be another one that I think will emerge in that group from there as well.
Lance, how do you make sure that when you end the spring on a good note, and then you have many months off until fall camp, that when you pick up in August, there's no setbacks? How do you keep those kind of guys, doing the right things off the field in between
that's
time?
what we talked about, making great decisions, doing things, and as I said, we've got to capitalize on all this time before they head home for a few weeks. We got to maximize time in the weight room, still find ways to get better, take care of themselves. Whether it be through diet, rest, weight room, training room, finding ways to continue to be in the playbook and find ways to stay on top and stay sharp, because we can't come back at the beginning of June and be starting completely over again. Okay, whether that be in strength or conditioning or really knowledge of the playbook. Same thing will be when we report, late July. We got an earlier start than ever, so we've got to make sure we're on top of it from there. And we talked about it this morning as we left the field.
Lance, I think you mentioned on Saturday, with all the new faces, you've kind of had to change up a little bit of coaching style and dynamics. How different has it been this year with the way you have had to do things versus like a year where you had a lot of continuity like last season?
It's different, again, to keep pushing competition and understanding and finding a way of how guys respond to coaching, what is it, but again, kind of to piggyback off the question about our coordinators, and both sides, and I look at probably on defense, DK, had his time in the NFL and stuff. He's very consistent, but he's also there's no gray area. What he expects and what he wants, because this is the way it needs to be done. If not, somebody else is going to get the opportunity. So, again, I think, as I said earlier, when guys come in and do those certain things, guys want to know where they stand. The question is, can they always take, can you take the coaching? Are you willing to move on from there? And we challenged this group really after the first week pretty consistently, and some of those were the newcomers, is if you want to be the player you want to be and fulfill the opportunity that you came here to hopefully achieve, you've got to be able to take the hard coaching. You got to take and own what we're seeing on film and take the things and get better at it. And I think this group has. And we talk a lot about being coachable in body language, and I like where this group's at.
The wide receiver room, is there a position group now that spring's over that you're looking to in fall camp take another step, maybe like the wide receivers do?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot that we got to continue. Up front is still going to be a little bit of work in progress for us in the fall camp, and there's, whether it be through added strength in the weight room, knowledge of the offense, different things. I don't think there's a lot of positions yet that we're not ready to say this is going to be the starting unit. So it'll be very competitive. I see us playing a fair number of guys in the back end of the secondary. I think we'll rotate some guys at linebacker probably as well, because we feel good about our younger guys that have come along as well through camp. We always rotate up front defensively. So I think we'll continue to play a lot of guys. But if there's probably the one between the tight ends and offensive line, we still got some things that are still going to be competitive through camp.
Jalen would be able to go in the summer. Are there any players who you don't think will be able to go in the summer or even longer?
I haven't got all the full, Nolan Gorsica yet will be one. I'm not sure when he'll be cleared to do things. Harry Stewart will be one that we will probably monitor more towards the end of May, exactly what his return to play time will be. And then David Abajuan will not be available. He went through another knee surgery here this last week, so he will miss next season. So, but I think those are the ones for now.
That was Kansas head football coach Lance Leipold speaking with the media on Friday, wrapping up spring football. Put a fork in it, Kevin. It's done. We still have more coverage to do. We haven't gotten to all of our position breakdowns, so we'll still actually be talking plenty more football over the coming weeks with the position breakdowns. But real quickly, Kevin, after hearing from Lance Leipold, what was kind of your reaction? What's kind of your, I guess, closing thoughts on this spring for KU football?
Yeah, it was a fun spring, a competitive spring, as Leipold made the reference to. One of the reasons they moved spring so early this year was because they had so many new guys and wanted them to kind of hit the ground running it. And now they'll have sort of prolonged weight room session, if you will, off season, however you want to put it, before coming back for fall camp. I think one of the things that really stood out to me, Nick, is I mean, you heard a lot of talk about developing leadership, all of those things. They were very happy with where a lot of the new guys came in. If there was a position group that maybe, I guess you would say, exceeded expectations or came out of the spring being a little bit better than maybe what I thought it would be, just based on what we've heard from other people, is probably the receiver position, which is not a bad thing, because I think Kansas on offense, when you look around, you feel like Kansas has a chance to be really good offensively again. The question was, hey, is Jalen Daniels going to have pass catchers that he can rely on? And while Jalen, was limited in the spring, he was, running around and doing certain things at the end of spring. Looks like he's going to be pretty healthy. But I do think the answer was pretty affirmative, that he is going to have pass, a lot of guys to catch passes. I think the offense, a lot of people talking about, it sounds a lot more like 22-23, right? When Kansas was really creative and running a lot of option stuff. And then when you were trying to stop the option stuff they were running, that was when they hit you downfield with shot plays. And it sounds like Kansas wants to be very similar offensively. Defensively, Nick, I feel like Kansas is kind of hiding away some stuff in the closet in terms of not really wanting to reveal a whole lot. The one thing that they did say a lot of was, hey, things have been simplified. We've been trying to make it to where everybody can just get off the ball, play fast, play physical. The defense had a good spring. Those are kind of my general sort of rambling thoughts. What was sort of your main takeaway?
Yeah, my two biggest takeaways, firstly, is echoing what you said there at the end. The defense, I think Kansas has some cards up its sleeve on that side of the ball. You're talking about a new coordinator in DK McDonald, who's never been a coordinator at this level before. Obviously has tons of experience, including at the NFL level, but never as a coordinator. So you have some questions about even just what scheme KU is going to be running. Are we looking at having 4-down linemen, 3-down linemen? Are we going to be changing how we, gap schemes, all that stuff, some of the more nerdy stuff, I guess you would call it. And then on top of that, you add in the fact that on the defensive side of the ball, especially, you have a lot of new players, especially in the back half. I mean, you're replacing literally every linebacker, right? And so that is both, I think, exciting and also, I think it's reasonable to be a little bit concerned about how that's going to go at the start of the season, right? And you look at the back end of the secondary as well. I think losing 2 first-team All Big 12 corners, that's you're going to feel that. I think in more ways than one. And that's not to say that those the corners that Kansas has helped them step up, but that that's going to be a transition. So I think that adds a little bit more pressure to the front 7, or I guess the front 4 really, in terms of your D ends and D tackles. And we talked about it on our show previewing the D tackles, that you think that's the best position group on the team. And I think that's going to need to show early in the year. I think that's going to have to really show itself to start the season for KU if there is a period of getting the linebackers, getting the back half of the defense up to speed and you know, with scheme and everything else, and just having those new faces. So that, I think, is my biggest takeaways. There's still a lot of mystery on that side of the ball. Some of it, I think, definitely intentionally done by Kansas, not wanting people to fully maybe know exactly what they're going to be doing, but also just with the transfers as well. And then on the offensive side of the ball, it's Jalen Daniels, right? And it kind of ties to what you were talking about with the receivers. It's Jalen Daniels is the unequivocal leader. You know, no more Devin Neal, no more Jared Casey, no more of any of your receivers, Luke Grimm, Lawrence Arnold. Like, it's Jalen Daniels. It is Jalen Daniels, and I guess you could throw in Bryce Foster, because you look at the offensive line, not even any Bryce Cable do, you know? So he is the unequivocal leader. And we heard from Daniel Highshaw about stepping up into more of a leadership role as well. But to me, it starts and ends with Jalen Daniels. And similarly to the conversation with the defense, I think it's reasonable to be somewhat concerned about his limited participation in spring. And obviously, I think we saw what happened last season when he was unable to maybe have a full off season. And that was with receivers that he'd been playing with for 4 years. So you add in the level that now you have new receivers. I think it's reasonable to be somewhat concerned about that. But also, I think also you look at how Jalen Daniels played to end the season and say, okay, use that as a springboard, regardless of injury, come into 2025. And I would guess, Kevin, that Jalen Daniels especially probably learned from what happened in 2024 of, hey, I wasn't as maybe fully up to speed or as I needed to be to start the season, right? Yep. For whatever reason that may have been, injuries, injury concerns, whatever. For whatever reason, I would hope that Lance Leipold and Jalen Daniels sat down and Jim Zabrowski sat down and said, we need to make sure that it doesn't take 4 games to get going, right, with Jalen Daniels, because that's essentially what happened this season. And that was, I think, a major factor in why Kansas struggled out the gate. So as long as they can get that figured out and get the receivers going, I agree with you. I think the offense, the potential is certainly there, right? And Jim Zabrowski is a mad scientist. He's going to come up with all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, everyone talks about Kotelnicki. Zabrowski may, I think there's a potential we see even crazier stuff in Zabrowski than what we saw from Kotelnicki in some situations. So that's exciting. But yeah, those were kind of my 2 overarching takeaways. Is I mean, it's hard not to gravitate towards Jalen Daniels and what that storyline means and how significant it would be for him to get going and to integrate and to get these receivers integrated in and so on and so forth, along with Jim Zabrowski. And then on defense, it's the mystery. I'm not really sure what we're going to get from that side of the ball quite yet.
Two things I think working in Jalen's favor. 3 things actually. One, it sounds like he is going to be full go for conditioning, so he should be fully up to speed. He'll have the whole summer to work with receivers, all of those things. 2, I think Zabrowski and Lubick, that I think are the 2 and 3. Zabrowski being the play caller and knowing Jalen the way that he knows Jalen and knowing what Jalen wants to do, what Jalen's best at, what he's comfortable with. And I think Lubick coming back, the thing that we've talked about it on this show, Nick, the thing that Lubick does so well is quarterback run game, right? If you watched Nevada last year, the stuff that they did with their quarterback position and running the ball, it's really easy to take Nevada film and just sort of superimpose Jalen onto it and see a situation where he's going to have a lot of success. And so I think that those 3 things I think are all shaping up where I don't think Jalen's going to be rusty, because I think he's going to go through fully healthy. I think that Zabrowski calling the plays is going to be a really good thing for him. And I think Lubick coming back and helping design kind of that quarterback run game, the option stuff, all of those things, I think all of that is going to work out into Jalen's favor, and he has a chance to have a really, really big final year on campus.
Well, and regardless of what anybody says, I'm just looking at it and saying, based off what happened, there obviously was some internal concern, I think, about getting Jalen hurt again to start the year with his run game, right?
Sure.
So I think this year the mentality needs to be we can't play that way. Like we just need to utilize Jalen to what his full talents are, including the quarterback run and everything that he can do. And if another injury happens, it happens. I think the lesson there should be you can't play scared thinking you're preventing an injury. Go and utilize a player like that, a guy like that, utilize his full skill set, his full abilities, and whatever risks may come with that potentially. So, that's what I would say too. A successful spring, I think, certainly for KU. An exciting offseason ahead, I think, for Kansas as well. On the football side, there's going to be a spring portal that's going to be starting up. Nico Iamaleva, I think, maybe. Obviously, if you were paying attention to that drama, that's going to be part of it as well. But yeah, the transfer portal is going to open. We talked about it, I think, on a previous show. Kansas is probably still going to be in the market for a tackle. And in fact, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on some potential tackle opportunities on offense for Kansas in the spring portal, and maybe another cornerback. So not only is it just KU's basketball spring portal, it's KU football spring portal, man. It's portal season year round, 365, 24/7 portal season. And if you don't like it, too bad. Because honestly, I don't really like it either, but it is what it is. It's the world we live in now. So, Kevin, you got any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up and head out of here?
Well, one thing real quick that's semi off topic is you follow the On3 graphics stuff where they have like this
I do
online. Do you see that? Do you see the I'm a leaving graphic?
I am a leaving.
That was one of their best ones, and they've had some pretty great ones and some kind of out of pocket ones, but that was well done.
I am trying to up my graphic game here at KCSN to be on that same level. So I'm doing my best. But yes, whoever does that they do a good job. Certainly, they do a good job. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, if you haven't already and you've made it this far, absolutely subscribe. Absolutely like the channel. Drop a comment. Share your thoughts. Join the conversation. Tons of ways to stay connected with the show. And again, you want that notification bell turned on so you are notified when our shows come out, especially during this time period where could be breaking news, could be things happening that you want to know about quickly, and we'll have you covered here on the show. Until next time, though, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer, and we'll talk to you again very soon. See ya.